What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing another weapon breakdown for Battlefield 2042, this time covering the AC-42. In these weapon breakdowns we're going to be going through a bunch of stats that you guys need to know, such as rounds per minute, reload times, bullet velocity, damage over distance, bullets to kill over distance, and time to kill over distance as well. On top of those stats we'll then go over the recoil pattern for the weapon, and then lastly I'll go over 3 unique loadouts that I've crafted for specific playstyles for those of you guys who aren't 100% sure on which attachments to use. Before we get into it, if you guys do end up enjoying the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new to the channel then definitely hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications, as there's going to be plenty more content like this on the way in 2022. With that being said though, guys, let's get stuck right into my weapon breakdown for the AC-42. So the AC-42 is obviously classed as an assault rifle, and you unlock this one a little bit later on at level 40. It has a magazine size of 30 rounds and it fires at a rate of 1,199 rounds per minute, which is the fastest out of any weapon in the entire game, even faster than the K30, which is just ridiculous to think about. Now for its reload times, it takes 2.66 seconds for a tactical reload, which is when you manually reload it, or it has an empty reload time of 2.83 seconds, which is when it automatically reloads after running out of bullets. As for the velocity, it sends its ammunition down range at 620 meters per second, which is actually the second slowest out of all of the ARs currently in the game, but only a tiny bit in most cases, so it's essentially on par with those other weapons. Now getting into the more detailed stats for the AC-42, keep in mind that these values are all based off of body shots, and when it comes to ARs, headshots have a 2 times multiplier, so any value that you see in these graphs are just doubled when you land them to the head rather than the torso or the limbs. The AC-42 deals 26 damage per bullet up to 49 meters, and then at 50 meters and beyond it drops down to 22 damage per shot, so as you can see it barely has any drop off at all at range. As for the bullets that it takes to kill over distance, it takes 4 shots to kill up to 49 meters, and then at 50 meters and beyond it'll take 5 shots to the body to kill an enemy. Lastly, moving on to the time to kill over distance, it kills in 225 milliseconds up to 49 meters, and from 50 meters and beyond it will take 300 milliseconds to kill, which is up there with some of the fastest in the whole game. Obviously these stats do vary quite a bit once you account for headshots and missed shots like I mentioned, but assuming you hit every shot to the body at these ranges, then these stats are accurate according to that situation. Now moving on, we have the recoil pattern for the AC-42, and as you can see it essentially has no recoil whatsoever. I'm shooting this as fast as you can possibly shoot it and using no attachments other than the red dot sight, and it has pretty much no recoil at all, so as you can imagine, once you use some attachments to reduce that even further, it may as well be a literal laser beam. Now like I mentioned, I've actually crafted 3 different loadouts that I often like to use on the AC-42 depending on the mode or the map or just how I feel like playing in general, so if you're not 100% sure on what attachments to use, then hopefully this can give you guys a good starting point, and obviously these can be slightly altered and adjusted to your own preferences, so these are by no means set in stone. Also keep in mind that you can obviously bring 3 attachments per slot in the plus system, so technically you can bring all 3 of these loadouts along and change them on the fly. The first loadout that I wanted to cover is the close quarters build. Obviously the AC-42 is completely dominant at long ranges, but it can still do pretty well up close as well, and this loadout will pretty much make it as good as it can be up close. For the sight I use the Fusion Hollow simply because it is the one that I like the best and it works really well for close quarters. For the ammo I use the subsonic rounds. They simply just feel better than the regular magazines up close, and so I do often switch these out when I'm entering a close quarters area, but on paper they are actually essentially the same as the regular ammo, they just feel better for me personally. For the underbarrel I use the Rattlesnake light grip, which is the best for the situation, and you'll know why if you've seen my underbarrel attachment video. And then lastly for the barrel I use the Type 4 heavy suppressor, as it actually doesn't hurt at all to use this at close range, and since it keeps you off the radar it has that positive without any negatives at all, unless obviously you do use it at long range, but up close this has no downside to it at all. Now moving on to the second loadout that I wanted to cover, this one is the long range build, and this is purely for like super long range. I'm talking like counter sniping type of ranges, and what I'll say about this build is that it's crazy good if you use it in the single fire mode, so be sure to give that a try. It quite literally does not have recoil, and I'm not even joking when I say that. For the sight I use the TV 2x scope, as this is just one of my favorite sights, but obviously you could go higher if you do like, just don't exceed the 3.5x scope because otherwise it will have that sniper glare. For the ammo ammo, I use the high power rounds as they increase the bullet velocity of the weapon and slightly increase the damage at range, at the cost of a little bit more recoil, a slower rate of fire, and a slightly slower reload speed. For the underbarrel, I use the LWG grip, which is the best grip in the game for static shooting, and then lastly for the barrel, I use the extended barrel, as this just increases the velocity of the weapon yet again at the cost of a slightly slower rate of fire. Like I said, this build is definitely going to make the weapon even more effective at range. I've had some games where I'm literally beating snipers at like 500 meters with this build. It is absolutely busted, so be sure to use it before it no doubt gets a nerf. Now, lastly for the third loadout, this one is what I call the all-rounder build, and this is essentially the loadout that I use about 80% of the time when I'm running the AC-42. In my opinion, this is probably the meta loadout for the weapon overall. It seems to suit its playstyle more than anything, so if you run this loadout while also bringing the attachments that I mentioned in the last two builds, you should have pretty much all bases covered. For the sight, I use the Fusion Hollow again, as like I said, this is just a nice clear sight and it's easily my own personal favourite for pretty much any weapon in the game. For the ammo, I use the extended mag as I do enjoy having a little bit of extra ammo more often than not. For the underbarrel, I use the rattlesnake-like grip again, and then lastly for the barrel, I use the tactical compensator, as once again this helps with that horizontal recoil. Not that it really has much, to be honest, but this will just make the very little recoil that it does have only really go vertically, and that is much easier to handle. Like I said, this is my personal favourite build for the AC-42, and it's the one that I'm running around with more often than not, so hopefully you guys enjoy this one as much as I do. So that is pretty much it for the AC-42, guys. Like I said, this is definitely one of the better weapons in the game, and especially when it comes to long range engagements, this weapon is absolutely busted. I think it will probably get a nerf, and knowing my luck, it will probably get nerfed before this video goes live, but if it does get a nerf, I'll get around to doing sort of like an updated version of this anyway. Up next, I'm hoping to cover the NTW50 for the sniper class, but other than that, let me know which weapon you guys want me to cover next, as I am largely basing these off of what you guys want to see the most, so be sure to leave some recommendations down in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. If you guys want to support the content that I make here on YouTube, then consider becoming a channel member. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.